Hey, once again, it's Tim Derling with Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Thank you very much for tuning in to yet another episode. As I film this is one of the last, maybe one of the last really hot days of this summer. So I'm filming this, and hopefully then I'm heading for the lake. So this isn't going to be a long one, but it's kind of unique. It's neither vinyl, nor is it a complete collection of any sort. It's kind of a follow-up episode to one I did earlier this year, and it's also kind of a primer on one of the architects of hard rock music, which if you're watching this show, you're probably a hard rock fan. So Deep Purple is the band that I'm going to be discussing today. It's of the original hard rock heavy metal bands, I think Deep Purple kind of gets the short end of the stick. They don't get the attention that bands like Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath and other bands like that get, which is unfortunate because they're every bit as important and every bit as innovative. And unlike those other two bands I just mentioned, still, as of filming this, are not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which, I mean, what else is new about that institution being ignorant to real rock and roll? But anyway, I'm not going to get off on that kind of rant. But I am going to talk a little bit about the few Deep Purple albums that I have collected, and a little bit about why it's sort of concentrated in one area. Earlier this year, I did an episode on the most recent Whitesnake album, which is called the Purple Album, which is a 15-song collection, 13 if you didn't buy the bonus disc, that David Coverdale had his current Whitesnake lineup re-record of songs that he was involved in when he was a member of Deep Purple, which he was from about 73 till they disbanded in 1976. Of course, they reunited, but under many different lineups. And I've got to say, for whatever reason, that album, I can't stop listening to it. It may be my favorite album of 2015. To be fair, I haven't heard that many new albums to come out in 2015. And certainly The Darkness, Last of Our Kind, and Europe, War of Kings are worthy contenders for that title. But I know I've listened to that Purple album a lot. And I was curious to fill out the rest of the collection, which means there are 3 albums that the source material came from. Burn, which I already owned. That was Coverdale's first album with Deep Purple. And then Stormbringer and Come Taste the Band. So I'll go over that. And I also have a few other Deep Purple discs that I've picked up here and there just to check it out. They're a band that I feel I should listen to more because they're of such importance to the music I love. And they do have some great songs. A lot of times I think that those great performances are sort of sabotaged by the production of the day. And that's a shame because there are some great songs buried underneath the really old, creaky production, which is another reason I think why I enjoy that Whitesnake Purple album so much. So I'll talk about Deep Purple today on the Tim's Vinyl Confessions, although I know that there are plenty of episodes of podcasts out there where some people have every single piece of vinyl that Deep Purple ever did and every album and can go into a lot more detail and a lot more passionate about it. I'm very much a beginner and I'm just trying to crack the surface of Deep Purple. So maybe this will be the start of sort of a renaissance for me. It's happened before with bands. It happened with Alice Cooper. It's happened with a lot of bands I really liked, actually. I started out not liking. I'm kind of funny that way. So I'll go into the Deep Purple albums that I do have and kind of a brief history. Deep Purple originally started, they were not exactly hard rock. As a matter of fact, their lineage goes back to, meaning that they're one of very few bands just to begin their recording career in the 1960s that I actually have any albums by, and the only other two would be Alice Cooper and Led Zeppelin. And when Deep Purple started, their first 3 albums came out one right after another in between 68 and 69, and my opinion, not exactly the easiest of listening. They did score one legitimate crossover, well not crossover, but one legitimate hit single with the song Hush, which is a cool song. That was a top 5 song. They were a band that were finding their way. Very psychedelic, very dated. You've got to be pretty hardcore to, I think, listen to those first 3 Deep Purple albums and really get into them. I don't think I'm destined to become a fan of that material except for Hush and maybe their version of Kentucky Woman, which I'll get into a little bit later on. But Deep Purple really came on, I think, the world's radar at large all the way back 45 long years ago, 1970, with the release of this album. I hope we're not getting the glare off of that. This is Deep Purple in rock. You've probably seen this in your $5 bins, department stores. do yourself a favor and pick it up. This is a really, really good album, but again, as I'll mention, you'll hear me mention this a number of times. You have to get through the production. It's 1970. Not everybody can sound like Queen or Montrose, but there are heavy songs, really great drumming from Ian Pace, Ritchie Blackmore, whammy bar stuff that was relatively new at the time. I think maybe Hendrix was doing it. I'm not a historian when it comes to 60s rock as I am from the 70s on, but you're hearing the beginnings of what would become standard arrangements, standard riff types, standard solo types. It's kind of all coming together here, Deep Purple in rock, all the way back in 1970. There's not a lot of albums in my collection that are older than me, and this is one of them. I was born in 74. So, and by the way, this was also the first album to feature the famous Mark II Deep Purple lineup. To this day, the best known Deep Purple lineup, and from left to right, the Rushmore-like figures depicted here are Ian Gillan on vocals, Ritchie Blackmore, of course, on guitar, the late John Lord on keyboards, Roger Glover on bass, and Ian Pace on drums. John Lord on keyboards had a lot to do with the Deep Purple sound. Oftentimes, the heaviness of Deep Purple didn't even come from Blackmore's guitar. It came from that Hammond organ when John Lord would hit a low note and the whole thing would just rumble. And by the way, any hard rock band that ever came out after that, which there are a lot, that had keyboard players in them, you've got Deep Purple to thank for legitimizing that. It really didn't happen, I don't think, before that. It was just guitar, bass, drums, and vocals, whether or not the vocalist was a standalone frontman or also played another instrument. This has Speed King on it. Hard Lovin' Man, which has been called one of the first songs that sort of has a staccato, kind of a chug, like a jug, 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 jug. That was relatively new at the time. And this is the Canadian version. It's on Warner Brothers. They were on EMI and a lot of other places in the world. This is the version I have of Deep Purple in rock. And I'm skipping all over the place here. There are huge gaps in the collection. Deep Purple have an enormous catalog waiting to be explored, actually, but this is what I've got at this point in time. The single best-selling Deep Purple album that isn't some sort of compilation is this one. This is Machine Head. This came out in 1972, and this is the reason that this is the best-selling Deep Purple album is 4 words: Smoke on the Water. One of the most iconic and simplest riffs of all time became Deep Purple's signature song. That appeared for the first time on this album. It's also got Space Truckin', Highway Star. It's a good album. It's generally considered to be their finest work in this lineup anyway. I don't think it's quite as good all the way through as in rock. It does sound a little bit better. Still, it sounds very early 70s, but it's a progression from the sound on Deep Purple in rock. This one actually has a little bit of some pictures inside of here. It's the front. What would the front and back cover be? Very little credits. And like a lot of early CDs that came out in the early to mid 80s on the Warner labels, this has some notes in it that basically sum up the group's career until then. Nothing fancy. And of course, there are deluxe versions that you can get of this. Machine Head is also an album that the UK Classic Album series has a DVD on, which I've actually never watched in its entirety. I'd like to check that out too. So we're skipping ahead another couple of albums, but only a couple of years because they were also a very prolific band. 1974, a major shift in the lineup of Deep Purple occurs, and this leads into one of the main reasons that I'm doing this episode. This is the point where Ian Gillan leaves to form his own self-titled band for a few years, and also Roger Glover leaves. Roger Glover would do some producing in that time. He produced Nazareth, he produced their Razzmanazz, he produced a lot of their early albums. He also, when Ritchie Blackmore split from Deep Purple, which was not too far away at the point in time I'm talking about, he went on to become a member of Rainbow as well. You see, between 76 and 84, there was no recording act called Deep Purple. There was Gillan, Rainbow, Whitesnake, and it just gets crazy with the intertwinings of, and then you bring in, names like Ronnie James Dio come into the picture, and Graham Bonnet and Jolene Turner, and it's the Deep Purple is literally the family tree of hard rock. You can link the various members of Deep Purple to so many different acts of today. But anyway, so Ian Gillan and Roger Glover leave. A young vocalist undiscovered pretty much at this point, never sang a professional album, named David Coverdale was asked to front Deep Purple. And he wasn't going to be the only singer this time around. Their bass player was also a singer who had been in a band called Trapeze, Glenn Hughes. Now Glenn Hughes has this crazy high voice, very, very soulful. Not exactly my style of singing. He's a great singer. I like the bluesy approach that Coverdale does, and Coverdale does tend to sing in a lower range. But they became the new sound vocally of Deep Purple. And at least initially, we're almost as successful as the Mark II lineup. And this was the first album that this lineup put out. This is Burn. It came out in 1974. You can see the album cover there. There are little like candles of each of the band members. If you look close, you can tell who they are. It's really easy to pick out Ritchie Blackmore with his top hat. I think that was by design. I've actually owned this CD for quite a while. Back when I used to... Anybody remember Columbia House? I was in Columbia House for quite a few years. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, ask your parents. And this is actually one of very few CDs that showed up that I didn't already have. So I got... This is the 2005 remaster. But this was a successful album. It was a top 10 album when it came out. This is the remastered version. It's the Canadian version, so it's on Warner Brothers and Rhino. Rhino Records are a great reissue label. A lot of you watching this probably, whether you know it or not, have sort of box sets or best of albums that are put up by Rhino. They always do a good job. And it's worth noting that of the 8 songs that appear on here, 6 of them end up on the Purple album by Whitesnake. So that kind of shows you how the strength of this album, that Coverdale felt that it was strong enough to have that many songs appear. More from this than the other 2 albums that Coverdale recorded with Deep Purple. So that's Burn. So I've had that for a while. I was familiar with those songs, but the next 2 I needed to pick up. And there are anniversary editions of these albums. I just wanted the regular versions. That was good enough for me. And also later on in 1974, same year Burn came out, Stormbringer. I love this album cover. This is such a majestic looking album cover. And if you're a fan of Rainbow, a neat little trick that I read, you can put the cover of this album and the cover of Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, their first album, which I don't actually have, side by side, and the rainbow completes one arc. It's got nothing to do with the music inside. It's just cool. I like that Deep Purple logo the best of all of them. This one is a UK version. It's on EMI. This one actually was kind of hard to find for quite a few years. It didn't really see domestic release on CD. And off of this album that the Purple album would cover, the title song Stormbringer is a classic. Holy Man. Holy Man on here is actually sung lead by Glenn, but Coverdale of course sings it on the Whitesnake album. Lady Double Dealer, The Gypsy, and Soldier of Fortune. Soldier of Fortune is a song that survived well all the way through the Whitesnake years. Coverdale would often do like a pared down acoustic version, not the entire song, but he would do a bit of that live in concert, usually to link other songs together. There's very little inside this one for credits, but I just wanted to get the songs off of it, and I'll be listening to this more to get the more familiar with the other tracks on Stormbringer. Yet another lineup change happened after that in Deep Purple in 1975. Ritchie Blackmore left. I mean, it's essentially Deep Purple was considered to be, and I guess probably by some, still Blackmore's band, but he left. And they got a new guitar player by the name of Tommy Bolin. Tommy Bolin, as I mentioned this in the Whitesnake episode, kind of a cult following, but if you're a Motley Crue fan, chances are you know the song Teaser, and that's a Tommy Bolin song. Tommy Bolin's version, if you check it out, the Motley didn't do much to it. They kind of kept the arrangement the same. Tommy Bolin unfortunately died of a heroin overdose in 1976, so he wasn't long for the world even when this came out. But this is the one album that features the Deep Purple Mark IV lineup, and I'm not even going to bother naming all the lineups that have followed since. But this is Come Taste the Band, very British sounding title. It's the band members' faces in a wine glass. This came out originally in 1975, and this CD is the UK EMI edition. And of course there are songs off of this album that appeared on the Purple album, which is one of the main reasons why Coverdale didn't approach it further with Blackmore, because there's no way Ritchie Blackmore was going to play on songs that he didn't originally play. But Coming Home, love this song. Lady Luck, Love Child and You Keep On Moving all came off of this CD, Come Taste the Band, which actually has a little bit more for credits this time around. It's actually got the lyrics, some band photos. When you buy these older albums, you just never know how complete they're going to be. They could be a single page fold out. They could have nothing in it. This is, I'm assuming this would have been the back album of the cover with the Wineglass empty. No more wine, no more band. And actually there wasn't for very many years. So the original lineup of the Mark II lineup of Deep Purple got back together in '84. Again, very briefly, but through the latter half of the '80s they recorded, but then they split up again, and it gets crazy with the lineups. So you kind of need to navigate your way through. The next thing I've got from Deep Purple, which I've had for quite a while, again, this was another Columbia House pickup. This is the very best of Deep Purple. This came out on Rhino Records via Warner Brothers in 2000. And this is a single disc compilation. It's a distilled version, like Rhino would do, of the box set called Shades, which is a 4 CD box set that Rhino would put up the year before this. This, if you're going to get one thing by Deep Purple, would be the one to get. This has Hush, Kentucky Woman. You're covering the early years of Deep Purple there. It's got Black Knight, Speed King, Child of Time, Strange Kind of Woman, Fireball, Demon's Eye, Highway Star, Smoke in the Water, Space Truckin', Woman from Tokyo, Burn, Stormbringer, and brings it at least into the 80s with their comeback hit, Knocking at Your Back Door, from the Perfect Strangers album. This one has, like most Rhino releases, a very, very in-depth write-up on the band's career, which comes in handy if you're actually trying to track, if you're actually interested in buying a little bit more than what you've got here. It's got a list of every single one of their albums, their chart positions. It's got a list of all of their lineup changes and a write-up on each of the songs. So I would say, if you're interested at all in Deep Purple, start with here. And if you're like me and getting into Deep Purple via Whitesnake, this one does have Burn and Stormbringer on it, so you've got a little familiarity as far as vocal sound. There's only one other thing I picked up on Deep Purple, where I've got most of the albums by a lot of the bands that I grew up with. When the Universal Music series Icon started coming out, most of them were of absolutely no interest to me. They're great primers. You know, you can go to a Walmart, or HMV or somewhere, pick them up for $5, get some great music quick. So I don't have any need for them, but I did buy this Deep Purple Icon, and this particular one came out in 2012. This was on Mercury Records, Universal, and they were Purple's label, at least in North America, in the 1980s when they came back with the Perfect Strangers album, which contained two really, really, really great songs. Really great songs. Knocking at Your Back Door, I mentioned, and the title song, Perfect Strangers. It was a sort of a recharged Deep Purple. It didn't last. The album they put out after that in '87 was called House of Blue Light. It wasn't quite as good, but it did have one killer tune in the song Bad Attitude. They also re-recorded Hush, so it was Hush re-recorded with Ian Gillan on vocals. Put that out as a single in 1988. It didn't chart, but they've got a version of that. So, and they also put out a live album called Nobody's Perfect. So this album gives you the highlights from the two studio albums they did in the 80s. The re-recorded Hush, and various classics such as Smoke on the Water, Child of Time, Black Knight, that appeared in that live album. So for $5, it's a great thing to pick up. And I know I'm just scratching the surface with Deep Purple. Hopefully I get the bug and want to collect further, because it's fun delving into a catalog that's so immense. And then delving into, the earlier Whitesnake, if you're not familiar with it, which is a lot like Deep Purple, more so than the Whitesnake that you may think of. Rainbow's another band that had many, many different lineups in an even shorter period of time. So let's hope that Deep Purple get their due and end up in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They're also one of the most influential bands out there, and I think if you talk to a lot of people, definitely like Lars Ulrich from Metallica will tell you he wouldn't be doing what he was doing if it wasn't for Deep Purple, all the way back to bands like Rush that say they were influenced by them. And so the seeds that Deep Purple planted with their music just, were very, very bountiful. So I myself, it's me going back and saying, what did I miss the first time around? First time I was listening to those early albums. And check it out. It's good stuff. You know, some of it, like I said, sounds pretty dated. You got to put your ears on a certain tuning and go, okay, it sounds like it's very muffled. It sounds old. That guitar sound isn't to my liking, but there's good substance behind it. And you may not even notice that. You may put that on and say, hey, that sounds good. But either way, thanks again for sitting through Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I appreciate it. If you'd like one of these shirts, we're still looking to get 100 likes on the Facebook page. So like the page if you haven't already, and share it with other music fans that you know of. You can also find me on YouTube and Twitter, but it's the Facebook page. I'm looking to reach that milestone of 100 likes, and 5 people out there are going to be chosen to win one of these cool Tim's Vinyl Confessions shirts. So thank you very much for watching this. I think I'm heading up to the lake.